Hello and welcome to another episode of Follow the Bookkeeper. I am your host, Morgan Trine. So previously, we've talked about why our firm, Honestly Bookkeeping, doesn't use QuickBooks Online to do our bookkeeping services, why we use Xero instead. But today we're going to take a step back and we're going to talk about what even is bookkeeping. So this is a question that we get asked pretty frequently when new clients come to work with us, because it's one of those business tests that you know you're supposed to do, but you don't know exactly why or what it entails. So we're really going to get into that concept today. So to start with, let's go through a definition of bookkeeping. And to start with, this definition applies to the current bookkeeping landscape because the industry has shifted from being on paper ledgers that you manually handwrite to using technology. This definition of bookkeeping has changed since the industry has changed. So if you learned bookkeeping, a couple of decades ago or before cloud accounting, then this definition may not sound familiar to you. And that's part of the issue with why everyone's like, what is bookkeeping? Because how it's done is different because the industry is changing. So that's just one piece of the puzzle. But the definition I'm using is pulled from Xero's website on an introduction to bookkeeping. So the definition that they use is that bookkeeping is the practice of recording and tracking the financial transactions of a business. Bookkeepers routinely summarize this activity into reports and show how the business is doing. They may also perform wider tasks such as invoicing, paying bills, preparing tax returns, monitoring key performance indicators, and providing strategic advice. So we're going to go and do a deep dive into each one of those sections in a little bit, but I wanted to start by giving that top line definition of bookkeeping to provide some context for the rest of this conversation. So what does this even mean in practice? There are two ways that we conceptualize bookkeeping at Honestly Bookkeeping. And so the first is compliance bookkeeping. And that bookkeeping is about preparing statements so that you can comply with tax law, right? Because as a business, you have to file a tax return. In order to file a tax return, you have to have the amounts to put into the little boxes on that form. And bookkeeping is at a very basic level, the way you get those numbers to put into those boxes on the tax return, right? So compliance bookkeeping is basically about keeping the IRS happy, right? And that's like a basic bare bones bookkeeping that you're doing. The second way that we conceptualize bookkeeping is what I call management bookkeeping. And that is about doing the bookkeeping so that you are presenting reports and information in a way that helps the business owner and management to make decisions about the bookkeeping. So this is kind of like a higher level bookkeeping or a step up bookkeeping compared to compliance bookkeeping. And this really comes into play when you need to start making decisions about the business that need to be backed by numbers and figures. And so we typically see that it's the businesses that have been in business a little bit longer, that are a little bit more complex, that need this level of management bookkeeping, right? And it's the business owners that have that like forward-looking perspective. They're like, I need to make decisions about the future using past and current data. Whereas when you're doing bookkeeping just for compliance purposes, that tends to be newer businesses that don't have history, or smaller businesses, small LLCs, sole proprietors, smaller revenue, typically a little bit more service-based. You can do just compliance bookkeeping, and the operations of your business aren't dependent upon that management level information. Right. And so as you can see, there's not everyone has to do bookkeeping for compliance, for tax purposes. But once you go into that management level bookkeeping, we're talking about businesses that are starting to grow, having, development or making material changes in their operations, and they need that level of reporting to support it. And so the difference then in how you actually do the bookkeeping between compliance and management comes down to there's certain things that you will do for management to provide like a picture that aren't technically correct for a tax return. And so you may do things so that, a board of directors for a nonprofit or, a business owner for a bigger business may need to see information presented in a way that then you do that for the management so that the decision makers can make those decisions. And then for tax purposes, at the end of the year, you move things, okay, we need to put this into compliance with how the tax return is going to be. And so as you can see that there is a certain set of bookkeeping knowledge that you need to have, between knowing what do you do for compliance versus what do you do for management. So you can see from this distinction between compliance bookkeeping and management bookkeeping that you're going to be having different types of conversations with whoever is doing your bookkeeping, depending on what type of bookkeeping needs you have. And so it's very important to make sure that everyone is on the same page about why you're doing the bookkeeping in the way that you are, and so that it supports your purposes. And so those are the sorts of conversations that we have with our clients as they come in, because that informs, again, the types of support and services that you're going to have based on the bookkeeping type. And so you can see here that there's also a level of tax knowledge that is involved with these conversations, right? Because you have to understand the tax implications of, okay, if we do this for management reporting, but it needs to be in this other place for compliance purposes, you have to know that there is a compliance piece to this. And so you can see that there's a sort of myth that plays into this conversation around bookkeeping and why it is that you do it. And one of the biggest myths that just really gets under my skin is that bookkeeping is just an admin task, right? You can hire any VA to do this, and it's just data entry. It's just, coding transactions. And hopefully at this point, you can understand that there's a lot more than it just being an admin task, right? And depending on your business and its structure, an admin or a VA could get you, pretty close, 80 to 95% of the way there on your bookkeeping. But there's that remaining percentage that has big tax implications. And so if you don't understand how all of these pieces flow together, how all of the financial reports flow together, how all of that flows into the tax return, you're opening yourself up to potential liability and potential tax implications. Because if you don't understand what those tax obligations are, if you think of it as just an admin task. And so that, right, has very far-reaching consequences if you're acting like it's just admin, just something that anyone should be able to categorize transactions here. But it really is more some tax knowledge that is required. And so that is also why, if you are the business owner doing your own bookkeeping, it can feel so stressful. Because the second myth that I see is this idea that as the business owner, you should be able to do your bookkeeping. It's an entire profession. Like, why is there this weird expectation that you should be able to do your business and this other profession of bookkeeping. And so we frequently get people coming to us feeling like down on themselves or feeling like there's something wrong because there's this conception of like, I should be able to do this. And once you understand your specific situation, and especially if we're talking, smaller, newer businesses, yes, it can be pretty easy. But again, it does require some of this knowledge. And that's partly why there's this this sense of like feeling like you're doing something wrong that business owners frequently express when they come to us. Because yes, the task of coding a transaction is easy, but there's this whole base of knowledge under that is also important to know and recognize. So if you're feeling friction within yourself, or if you have, a VA or a team member doing this, and like you're feeling that point of friction, that could be a piece of this, is that this myth around business owners, being able to do their bookkeeping, or it's just an admin task, when really there is that piece of knowledge that underlies all of it. So now we're going to go back to the definition that we presented at the very beginning of what bookkeeping is. And hopefully you can hear that, right? We've talked about bookkeeping as that practice of recording and tracking financial transactions within the business. And then it's also about summarizing that activity into reports. And so that happens no matter if you are doing compliance or management bookkeeping. And then the next part of the definition, they may also perform wider tasks such as invoicing, paying bills, preparing tax returns, monitoring key performance indicators, and providing strategic advice. And so all of that came under the realm of bookkeeping with the switch from paper to electronic bookkeeping methods, right? Because as technology is able to do more and more, that means that there's more time for bookkeepers to do additional services. And so that's also why it can be hard to find good bookkeepers, because what bookkeepers do has changed dramatically, and what each individual bookkeeper does is different. And so every single individual bookkeeper or firm that you go to for bookkeeping is going to do different amounts of these additional tasks. And these things, especially like with helping with advising, KPIs, cash flow, that also intersects with services that CPAs and CFOs also offer. And so you have sort of all of these professions within the accounting industry that can have overlapping services. And so it makes it so that you can't compare like, okay, a bookkeeper does this, an accountant does this, and a CFO does this, because each individual within those sort of three different spheres will have different things and services that they offer. And so you're never comparing apples to apples. You're comparing apples to oranges to grapes. And so again, that's why it's really important to have a clear idea of the type of bookkeeping needs and support that your business has, so that as you are looking for accounting professionals and bookkeeping professionals, you can ask very specific questions to start parsing out, who does what, and are they going to be a good fit for your business. So that also can help explain, like, if you're having issues with finding a bookkeeper to work with, why you might be having some of those issues to begin with. So I hope that provides some explanation about why you do bookkeeping, different methodologies for bookkeeping, what that purpose is, dispelling some of the myths around bookkeeping, and a little bit of background on bookkeeping as a whole and a profession. And as always, if you have questions, if this brought up anything else that you want to learn more about, leave a comment below, and I will hopefully be able to provide clarification on that. If you found this helpful, please share this with anyone that you think may benefit from learning more about what bookkeeping is and why you do it. And until next time, again, I'm Morgan Shrine. This was Follow the Bookkeeper.